Hi, this is Pastor Mendenhall, and I wanted to thank you for watching our Hope series. Today we are in episode 4 of our From Darkness to Light Hope series with Mitchel Perkins, a Marine who spent 3 deployments in Iraq, went through things that we can't even comprehend, and yet in the midst of that found himself at a dark place in his life. We're going to pick up the story now. Mitchel has left the Marines and is now back home here in Alaska, and he's out of the Marines now. You want to talk us through what happened then?
Yeah, I got out of the military, and then I'm kind of fumbling around. I pick up a security job easily enough, guarding the military base. Really simple. Um, uh, was was just doing that, doing night shift and guarding, and all of a sudden I'm now having to deal with my nightmares. Kind of picked up to a different intensity as I got out, and as I felt this isolation. I don't know if that was the reason, but they started taking on uh, characteristics of like reality. Like I would start smelling smells from war. Um, I could start feeling heat from tracer rounds or from burning buildings and burning cars, and there was just this feel, like you could start feeling it, and it was getting to the point that when I was waking up, when I'd wake up, I would still be dreaming while I was waking up. And so every day I would be seeing where I was, and I'd be seeing the dream for a few seconds. And so in that time I'd be wondering, well, am I in combat? Did I just micro nap and dream I was back home, or am I back home dreaming I was in war? And I wouldn't really know which one, because they both felt real. And you're seeing them both at the same time. You're kind of going through that. I had met my wife now. I had met her after my second deployment. We started dating, and I married her after I got out. I married her in 2008. But as all of this happened, I went to the VA, and they started wanting to treat me, and I went through this questionnaire, like, do you have these symptoms? Please be honest. And I mean, I'm lighting them up. Yes. Have you done this? Have you experienced this? Have you witnessed this? And it's just, yeah. Like, okay. And so they send me to a counselor, and I step in, and they're like, you have PTSD. And I flip out. I flip out in the counseling session, because the command told you, if you claim this, you're a coward and you're weak. And I stood up, I flipped the couch. I was like, are you calling me a coward? And I'm freaking out on them. And, that poor lady, like, you don't get paid enough to deal with that. So, I mean, I don't know. She pushed a button somewhere, because security came and got me, and kindly escorted me out. and and I got a new counselor. um, and I went from counselor. They hopped me around for a while, and they sent me to a psychiatrist. And they said, all right, we're going to start you off on these meds. And so they would start me off on these, and well, I didn't. Those weren't working, so they'd start me off on something new, or they'd up the dosage, and they were rotating these medications. And I mean, they got you on all sorts of stuff. They did blood work on me, and they found that my adrenal gland, I guess, was they basically said it was locked in the open position, like a valve that doesn't close all the way. It's just leaking. It's not pouring. It's just dripping. So my inside my system at all times was having adrenaline just leaking in it. So it was like gasoline, and you just needed a moment of frustration, and like everything set off in you. Just boom, it just all exploded. You're on edge all the time from this, and you just boom. And they're like, yeah, that's not normal. So I'm like, well, can you turn it off and get it regulated? They're like, well, we don't know how to do that. What we could try and do is give you blood thinners so that you have less. I'm like, well, okay. So we're going through, and that doesn't work. That gave me migraines. They gave me another one that made the anger worse. They gave me another one that made you dull. They found one. I don't know. I've been on so many that I didn't know what they had me on at that point. Most of them end in PAMs and this diazepam and clonazepams and all these things. And they had me on one where everything, you just locked into what I call gray. And you had no highs, you had no lows, you just had existence. And I don't know if it was an antidepressant. I don't know what it was, but they thought, well, that's success. And as I was sitting on it, I was actually starting to get suicidal, because I was sitting there and these thoughts would come in. I'm like, well, why am I even living if this is going to be my life? Like, this is not a life. And so I told them. They had cycled me on, I think, 20 something different meds. And it got to the point that at the end, they said, well, what would you like to try again? Maybe we do different combinations. I said, no. I told them, I said, look, if I want to just drug up all the rest of my life, I told them, I said, look, the street has better drugs. At least I can giggle than what you're giving me. What you're giving me does nothing but just numb me out. And, well, we're trying to get you to function. I'm like, that's not functioning. That's you're giving me a chemical lobotomy. And so I rejected that. Well, the second I rejected that, any government system doesn't like you exercising your rejection. So they're like, well, we can't do nothing for you. And out the door you go. And I kind of went through that for years. And I had a 5-year period where I was dealing with that. I had nothing going on as far as the VA, and the entire time my wife was just being dumped on by me, mainly because unfortunately I loved her. And so, because I loved her, I let her in. And because I actually let her in, I couldn't shut her out. And so, other people I could, put on a front and, yeah, I'm okay, and smile and go about it. But with her, you were in a place where the trauma was. And so it blew up on you a lot. Because I couldn't wall her out. Like, you're in the broken, and so you're going to deal with the broken with me. And so my marriage tore apart to where she felt like she was walking through a minefield every day, and I felt horrible for doing it. So I resorted to a childish thing of, if you have nothing nice to say nothing at all. And so I wouldn't talk to her for days. It's not because I was trying to ignore her. It's because that was the nicest thing that was going to come out of my mouth. It's not because she did anything wrong. It's not because there was anything bad to say to her. It was just everything in me that was going to come out was going to be awful.
So you have inside just this boiling rage and a deep darkness. Talk to us about the moment that you began to feel relief from that?
Um, I I sat there and I begged my wife to divorce me because I couldn't. Um, I I wanted her to leave, but she was the only glimmer of light I had in my life. She was the only good thing I had, and I felt like I was being slammed around in an ocean. And it's like, well, let go of the life ring, and I was clinging to it. And I told her, I said, I will let you go if you'll walk. I won't come after you, but I can't. I can't just let go. Like I can't just go because I know I'm going to plummet. So I'm asking you to leave, and she wouldn't. And I felt bad about that. So I got wind. My sister contacted me and said that there was a counselor that had arrived at the VA by the name of Dowling, and that he was excellent. So I'm like, well, let's give this another shot. I'm like, I'll go one more time. If this guy is as good as you say, I'll give it a go. And so I show up and I told him, I said, the only way I'm going to do these sessions is if my wife gets to stay in here with me. And he said, well, that's not VA policy. That's not what this is for. It's not for coupling sessions. And I looked at him, I said, look, this is the deal. I'm not in a relationship with you. I'm in a relationship with her. And if I'm going to go through and unpack all this stuff and have to relive all these traumas, she has the right to know you're not going to be with me the rest of my life. She needs to know why I'm blowing up. And so we agreed. And so we started doing the sessions. And we went through. He told me later that he had like 200 different patients that he was rotating through. And he's like, well, the level that people have experienced the trauma through deployment, I have 16 that have seen more than you. And he's like, and they're all special forces. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. Yeah. And he said, ironically, you're doing the best out of those 16. I'm like, well, that's not very hopeful, is it? And so we would always have to start our sessions with, do you feel like harming yourself? Do you feel like harming others? And those are questions you never admit to, because that will take you to the psych ward. They will institutionalize you. So, no, of course not. And but I went through this cycle, and he taught me different techniques. And I asked him, well, will I ever get better? And he said, no. He said, what I can do is I can teach you ways to manage the symptoms, to where you can manage the outbursts. And so I was like, so I'm going to have to deal with it the rest of my life. And he's like, yeah. Well, that kind of locked me into, there is no hope. And so while we went through this, he left, he moved on, and my Aunt Pam during this time had passed away. And I would stay awake at night. I would stay awake all night. I hated going to sleep. I would get anxiety about the nightmares I would have. And so I'd just stay awake. And then I would go to my roofing job and roof all day, come home, nap for 40 minutes, wake up from a nightmare and stay awake all night, and just do that until I'd crash. And while I was up in the middle of the night, often I would listen to music because it allowed you to somewhat stay distracted. And when my Aunt Pam passed, I had a song, a classical music song came to my mind. And it's like I had this urge. I really need to listen to this song. And I didn't like classical. It's not my thing. I was a metalhead. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to listen to that. Like, why would I even listen to that? I'm like, where's this even coming from? And I blew that off, and I blew that off for weeks. Every night without fail, that song would come. And I'm sitting there, and finally, one night I relented and put the song on my phone, and I'm listening to it, and it's doing the whole little classical music thing. You got the oboes and everything, and the cellos and the violins. They're all going, and it's like, oh, okay. And then it hits this section within the song where it sounds like what I thought church would sound like. It has these violins, but it has this choir that's singing these notes. And it's nothing but singing. There's no words. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow. And I can't explain it, but, the atmosphere kind of felt like it changed. And I'm sitting there, I'm listening. And then it drops off this woman hits this beautiful note, drops off, and this violin starts. And this violin hits this note that I don't know what it was, but they draw out this note, and all of a sudden something in my heart resonated like a tuning fork. And since my second tour, I hadn't felt anything in there. And all of a sudden I feel something, and it felt like somebody doing a deep muscle massage, and it hurt and felt good at the same time. And immediately I started crying. And so I did the natural thing, and I threw my phone right across the room. I'm like, no, what was that? I'm quite literally, I'm behind my couch, and I'm looking over at that phone like that thing's going to jump at me or something. And I'm like, what is that? And I don't touch the phone the rest of the night. And so the second night, I get the same sensation, same feeling. You need to listen to this song. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I just had a weak man moment. Like, what's going on here? And I go through, and song gets the same place, and that violin hits that note and draws it out, and my heart does the same thing. And I start crying. I throw my phone again. And so I do this for 6 nights. It took me 6 nights to get through the song. And every night it had the same reaction. And so on the 7th day, I'm sitting there, and I'm by myself. Kristen, I think, went to work. I didn't have work. It was a rain day. And I feel for the first time in my life the urge to pray. There is a genuine need to pray. Now, I've prayed before, and mostly like, oh God, don't let the cop give me the ticket. Oh God, don't let them search me right now. And I've even prayed the sinner's prayer one time, because I met them at Palm Springs, and there was a group. And they're like, oh, would you like to say the sinner's prayer? And I was so annoyed by them, because they were sitting there and they were just so hounding, and they wouldn't let me go. I said, fine, let's get through this. So we go through the sinner's prayer, and they're like, hallelujah, brother, you're saved. I flipped them, a worldly finger, and I walked off. And they're still just, oh. I'm like, oh, whatever. I'm just glad to be away from you people. And I went on with my life. Well, this is the first time I'm sitting here, for the first time I have a desire to pray. And I don't even know why. And the whole morning I'm fighting it. I'm like, well, why would I even want to pray? Like, why? That makes no sense. Why am I going to pray? And finally, it just slowly built up. The need, like holding your breath. The need for air. I just needed to pray. And so I prayed for the first time in my life. And I prayed a very simple and honest prayer. And my prayer was, God, I don't believe in you. I don't believe you exist. I don't even know why I'm doing this. But if this is you trying to speak to me, I want to tell you thank you, and I love you for it. I said amen. That feeling, that need of prayer lifted. And I said my piece. I never had any intention of ever praying again. I never imagined anything would have come of it. But that night came after I prayed, and about 2 a.m, and I'm walking around my apartment listening to music, and all of a sudden I'm walking and something just right in the back of my head hit me as hard as I could. And I mean the type of hit where the impact, you feel it right into your toes, just boom, just travels through your body, but there was no pain. And when I got hit, all of a sudden this light started rushing in like water. And it was so loud, it sounded like you were under a waterfall. And it's just, and this light's coming in. And it is so bright. I've never seen something so bright or so white in my life. And I'm sitting there, and I'm stretched out because the pressure of this water is just stretching you. And I'm sitting there, this light's sitting here, and I'm shaking. I can feel myself shaking, but not in the muscles. I can feel myself shaking like in your bones, like they're vibrating. And I'm scared, but at the same time I'm in complete peace. And there is this warmth and this love and this light that I've never ever felt in my life. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And you feel yourself almost kind of disappear in this, like you're becoming part of this light. And right when I thought that I couldn't take any more of this, it stops and it feels like you're floating, just kind of suspended in it. And right where my heart was moving from the note, I hear a voice right in there, and it says, I am. And then immediately the light left. And I'm kind of sitting there, I'm like, I am? What is that? Like, I've never heard that before. What is I am? But I was convinced. I was like, I think God just came to me. And so I go into my bedroom. I wake my wife up at 2:30 in the morning. And I said, baby, wake up. She, what's wrong? I said, baby, I think God just came to me. And my wife, what? She rubbing her eyes. I said, baby, God just came to me. Now my wife, mind you, is being woken up by a man that is mentally traumatized and is telling you, I just had this experience. So you can see in her face, there is this realization, it might be time to put this man in the institution. There's, she's trying to process this. God bless her. She's sitting there like, what? God came to you. And so I'm trying to explain to her exactly what happened. I'm like, look, this light came in. It felt like there, you could feel it like water, how it has substance and it's warm. And I'm going through, and you can see she's not receiving it. And I said, baby, what will it take for you to believe me? And all of a sudden, this voice speaks again. And it said, Mitchell, I want you to spit out your tobacco and quit. Now, I had started tobacco at School of Infantry, and I only used it. I started using it with the intention that it would help me stay awake during the field. And at the end of the school, I intended to stop. Well, by the end of the school, I had grown accustomed, and it had sunk its nasty little hooks in. And so for 10 years, I had never been able to quit tobacco, and with the increase of trauma that I was dealing with, to take away my only stress reliever was insane. And so I heard that, and in my head, I'm like, no, that's crazy. Now, I mean, and that's the level of addiction I had to tobacco, is that, well, I just had something speak to me, but you're telling me to quit. That's my line of crazy. Like, no, we're not crossing that. I can deal with everything else. We're not crossing this line. And so me and my wife, we go roundabout again. I'm trying to get her to understand, and we end up at the same place. What will it take for you to believe me? I hear the voice again a second time. Spit out your tobacco and quit. And again, I reject the notion completely. No, I'm not doing that. No. And so we circle one more time, and I'm, baby, what will it take? And I hear the voice this time a little more firm, and it said, Mitchell, spit out your tobacco and quit. And so I stood up. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to spit out my tobacco. I quit. I'm going to show you. And so I walked to the bathroom. I spit out my tobacco. I threw my can in the trash. I brushed my teeth, got it all out. Now my wife is looking at somebody who is mentally traumatized, potentially mentally psychotic, and is about ready to go through withdrawals. So she's not liking this night. But the second I threw it out, I never had a single withdrawal ever. It was like I never touched it. I was immediately delivered. And so she watched me the next day, waiting for the withdrawal to kick in, and it never happened. And so she watched me the second day, waiting, and it never happened. And finally, while I was immersed in the light, I had this feeling now in me, I have to get baptized. And I could not explain it. The only thing I knew about baptism is, you see it occasionally in a movie or something. Somebody, they go, and it's like, all right. But all of a sudden, just like with the prayer, I now have an urge, a need. I need to be baptized. And being in the world, I thought, well, where should I go? Because as a worldly person, you hear, well, Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, but from a worldly perspective, a church is a church is a church. And Kristen was, as a teenager, she was Pentecostal. My Aunt Pam was Pentecostal, and her brother attended a Pentecostal church in Eagle River. And so I said, well, logic dictates I would start there. So I go and I run to the church. I drive over. I get in. The pastor happens to be there. I meet him. And I said, hey, I know you don't know me. And I said, this might be hard for you to believe, but God came to me, and I need to be baptized, and I need to be baptized right now. And he said, what? And I said, look, God came to me. I explained to him everything. I said, now that you know, baptism time. And he said, you know what baptism is? I said, nope, it involves water, right? And he's like, yep. He said, you know why you do it? I said, no. I said, but I know it washes sins, does it not? He says, yes, it does. I said, well, I got a lot of them, so let's dunk. And he's like, well, why don't you come to service? I said, okay, I'll come to service. So I get up the next day. I think the next day was Sunday. We get up, and I go to service. First time I've ever actually stepped foot in a church for a service. I've been there for weddings or funerals. But worship, it was nice. He gets done. He's like, how was it? I'm like, that was good. And what'd you think? I said, I think I need to get baptized, and I need to get baptized right now. He said, well, let's schedule your baptism for next week. I think he was trying to fish me. So for the first time now, I walk away, and there's a genuine fear I realize I need this baptism. I've never read a scripture in my life, but I know I need it. And now I'm thinking, well, what if I die before I get this thing? And so, like, I basically, I holed up in my house. Like, I sat in my house. I came out of my house as little as possible for that week. I just sat there. And Sunday came. It's baptism time. And I get to go, and I look at the water. The water's cold. It's got dead bugs floating in it. And I'm like, let's get in. It's time to go. Because if baptism's going to wash my sins, I'm leaving worse things in there than those dead bugs. So we go. I get in the baptismal. He calls the name of Jesus over me. He dunks me in. I come out, and I feel light as a feather. Like all the weight that I was carrying just comes off. And so I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And I go home feeling good. And then the night comes and I can't sleep. And I don't know what's going on. Can't sleep. And I go to the mirror. I'm in the bathroom. I wash my face. I look up, and all of a sudden, it was like being shown a film. Everything you did wrong, every person you hurt, all the war, all the bodies, all the screaming, all of it just slamming like a train right before your face. And all the weight that I thought went off of me during baptism suddenly slammed back on me. And so I went out to the couch. It's 2 a.m. again, 1 or 2. It's in the early hours, and I get on my knees in my living room, and I kneel at my couch, and I pray the second time I've ever prayed. And I start crying under this weight. And I start crying, and I just pray, and I told God, I said, God, you made me believe that baptism forgives me. I said, I need to know, am I really forgiven? And I just kept praying that over and over and over. Like, God, do you really forgive me? Am I really forgiven? I need to know, am I really forgiven? And over and over and over. And I wasn't being quiet about it. And all of a sudden we lived in the upper apartment. And it's an older apartment and rickety floors. I felt a footstep shift to my left, so somebody was standing behind me and shifted, and I felt an immediate shift to my right. And in my mind, I'm praying and crying, and I thought I woke my wife up, and she came and stood behind me. And I'm sitting there weeping, and all of a sudden I feel a hand touch my right shoulder blade. And when it happened, the light started rushing in from that point. And it came back in, and I'm crying. I'm just crying in this light. But as it came in this time, there was things that I can only describe as like black tar that the light would touch, and it'd break it loose, and it would slide up and into the hand as like light was coming in. This stuff was being sucked out. And I'm crying, and I'm weeping, and I'm shaking, and I hear I don't hear the waterfall this time. I hear a noise. It sounds like people cheering and crying and clapping. It sounds like when I was in a stadium. And I, again, never read the Bible. I did not know that all of heaven rejoices. I didn't realize I was hearing some rejoicing. And it's just going and going. And all of a sudden it stops and it pulls off. And the light's gone. And my tongue is doing this thing. And I can't duplicate it. You can't mimic it. but it's going off like a machine gun. I mean, that thing is just rattling to the point that the tip of my tongue feels hot. Like like in my head, I'm like, it's lit up like a red barrel. Like we are sending some rounds off of this thing, and it's just going. I'm like, what is this? And I went on like that for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, and it stopped. I, get up, ugly cry. I've cried everything out, mucused out. I wipe off, wake my wife up. I'm like, God came to me again. And I said, and there's something wrong with my tongue. So I didn't know. I went back to the church. I talked to the pastor there. I said, look, God came to me again. This is what happened. And I said, my tongue started doing things. I don't know. He's like, oh, that's the Holy Ghost. I'm like, what's this Holy Ghost you talk about? And so he showed me how you get the Holy Ghost, how God comes in and you're filled with his spirit. And the sign that you've received his spirit is that you speak in another tongue. And so I went back and I prayed my third prayer. And my third prayer was, God, I don't understand. Why did you touch my shoulder? Why not here? This is what's broken. This is what hurts. Why'd you touch there? And in my prayer, right inside, I heard, Mitchell, this is where you first worship death on your body. And when I got done with my first tour, I got back and I got a tattoo skull with one shot, one kill, with a bullet hole right in his forehead to commemorate, killing. And he said, this is where you worship death on your body. So this is where I had to start. And after that, I told him I was enrolled in the engineering program. I disenrolled, and I said, whatever you do, I want to serve you. I didn't know you were real. I didn't have a life until you came, and so it's yours. Whatever you want with it, I will do it. And since that point on, my wife and I, we've been in the church, and God has just been taking us on this journey.
So the darkness, in that moment, God touched you, and miraculously, what medication couldn't do, what counselors couldn't do, what all of man's science couldn't do, in a moment, in the presence and power of God, he delivered you from everything that you had been going through.
Yeah, he did.
And the darkness that you had was transformed to light. If ever I've heard a modern day Apostle Paul testimony of a bright light knocking you off your donkey and into the street, and what an amazing testimony that our God is real.
Yes.
And we're not following cunningly devised fables, as the Bible would say, but what we're following is a real thing. And so talk to us a little bit about your life since you've given your heart and your life to God.
Well, there's been many things. The first traumatic change is what I would describe as the inversion of my life, which is when I was in the world. It's not like every day was bad. It was just that the overwhelming majority was. At least for me, I had good days, but they were rare. And I knew that when I had them, even when I was having them, they weren't permanent. It felt like you were coming out, like you were in a prison, you were stuck in the hole, and you were in that dark solitary. And what it felt like to me when I had a good day is you got shuffled outside so you could see the sun for a little bit. And then you got shuffled right back to your hole. So I knew that when I had a good day, it wasn't going to stay like that. I was going to descend right back. And with God, it flipped to where when I have bad days, I know it's not going to stay that way. That eventually God's going to bring me out of this, and I'm going to come right back up to where I was with him. So instead of, well, the good days aren't going to stay, I now have a life where the bad days can't stay. That even though I have them before, I never had hope, now I always have hope. That to me is one of the biggest changes of my life that I've had. Is I tell people God meets people at different places in their life. You can Some people meet him in sickness, some people meet him in need, but Jesus also met a thief on a cross, and the cross is condemnation. The cross is where you are nailed, you will be in pain, and you will stay this way until you die. And that's where God met me in my life. I could not get out of my despair or my darkness, and I knew every day was going to be as excruciating as the last, and it would be like this until I finally died. And so when he met me there, I feel like I relate to that thief where it's like I get to finally walk in darkness. Now I didn't know that everything God would do is God God has had, to work, and there's broken things that were in me that even though he took the darkness, is kind of like when your nose is broken, we have to realign this. And so there was things that I had gone through in my childhood and in everything that were out of alignment. And so God said, look, bite down on this. This is not going to feel good, but it's necessary. And so he has brought me through process and snapping things back into position. And while I haven't appreciated or enjoyed it while I'm going through it, I'm grateful that I have, because every time he has, I get to know him better.
What a powerful message of hope. And I've watched you over the years. Mitchell and Kristen both were founding members of this church with us. They came down when we started this church a little over 7 years ago, and I've watched God transform this man. And he doesn't see the growth that I have seen in him, to a very powerful preacher of this gospel, anointed man of God. But what a transformation from somebody that hated even the thought of Jesus Christ, to a man that would give his life for that very same name. We're here talking about hope and how God can take you out of darkness into light. And Mitchell has spoken with us about his transformation from darkness to light. And there's so much more to the testimony, but we are running out of time now. I want to thank you for watching and participating in our Hope series and in this series, or these episodes of From Darkness to Light. And I hope that you will continue to watch the other episodes that we have in this series of the Hope series. God bless you.